So many of you are probably like me. When you started painting, you were looking for that perfect combination, that perfect recipe that will allow you to mix skin tones. Well, today I have a cheat code for you. It's this right here, Pale Rose Blush, or you might have seen it in the store, and it's called Flesh Tint. Now, just using this on its own, some of you might have just used it on its own. Just using it on its own, your paintings might have come out cartoony. You know, it's way too bright, way too vibrant. It just doesn't look good. However, I've learned some techniques and I put together a recipe that you can use this and have it being your base to your skin tones and having your skin tones come out realistic and looking proper and close to your references. With this, you can get any array of skin tone. You can get your light skin tones, you can get your tanned, you can also get your dark skin tones. You can also get the shadows and tints in the skin tones, which a lot of artists tend to neglect. I'm going to get into it later, but those are especially important because it brings out more realism in your portraits and it gives your skin some actual vibrancy and dimension to it. But we'll get into that later. So this right here, I'm going to give you everything you need to know about Flesh Tint, aka Pale Rose Blush, and how you can use it in your portraits and how you can mix it for your skin tones. This is one of the easiest methods possible. Whether you're a beginner or advanced, this is something you can use, and I definitely recommend keeping it amongst your paints. Now, before we get into that video, I'm trying to grow this channel to 1,000 and beyond. The best way you guys can help me do that and show your support is by hitting that subscribe button. I'll give you a minute. All right, let's get into that video. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the colors that you'll be using along with the Flesh Tint or Pale Rose Blush. So, of course, we have our grand feature, but then also we're gonna need some titanium white. We're also gonna be using some burnt umber. Now, I wrote reddish tint or reddish on it because burnt umber has a more reddish side to it as opposed to raw umber where it's strictly more brown. Next, cadmium yellow light. Then we got cadmium red light, ultramarine blue. Now we're also going to throw in some additional colors that I'm going to show a demonstration with. So sap green. Then we got quinacridone red. And then we got turquoise. And then just some additional things you'll need, like you'll need a palette knife or some sort of mixing thing. Then, you know, just some cloth or tissue or something, wipe away the excess. Now, typically, these 5 right here are what you would see on my palette when I'm doing skin tones. However, there are some additions and some exceptions I'm going to be making in this demonstration. So if you've seen my mixing dark skin tones, which you can find here, I like to use quinacridone red. The reason being is that it has different properties than the cadmium red, light, medium, whatever cadmium it is. One of the mixing properties that's different about it is that if I go ahead and mix this with turquoise or a cobalt teal, it's going to give me a violet, where if I go ahead and mix the turquoise with a cadmium red, it's going to give me more of a brown color. Now, the reason why I mention that is because of my dark skin tones, I like to incorporate some sort of purple tint to it. So this combination comes handy. Also with the quinacridone red, I just feel it looks better for dark skin tones if I'm painting really dark skin. Another color that you've probably never seen me use, on camera at least, is the sap green. Now, sap green is good because it does well for shades. Mainly, I've used this for Caucasian flesh tones or light skin tones, and it's mainly used for shadows. So speaking of that, let's go straight into that part of the demonstration. I'll show you how to use this with your flesh tint. One big thing that people leave out when they're doing their portraits is leaving out a green tint. So let's do a little test one right here. We have our sap green and we have our flesh tint or pale rose blush. Now the shadows is what you're mainly going to be using this combination for. And then we're just going to add a bit of our sap green. I'm just going to mix it. Now, as I said, with this flesh tint, it just acts as a base that's going to allow you to skip over the step of having to combine all the primaries and add the white and taking it from there. This is just an expedited way of doing things. So you already see how it's tinted, the flesh tint, or the flesh tone, I should say. So we add a bit more sap green, get it more on the green side. And there's the shadow color that we want. This is very, very minimal when you typically see it in portraits, but it's a tone that a lot of artists usually skip and miss out on, but it is present in any type of skin tones, whether it be dark, whether it be light, you know, dark skin, light skin, it doesn't matter. I've seen it in all type of different skin tones. So there we have our shadow tint. Now, if we wanted to take the chrome out of this isn't very chromatic as is, but if we wanted to further take the chrome out of it and make it a bit darker, you just add a bit of cad red. The reason for that is because red is opposite of green on the color wheel. So it's going to knock down that vibrancy. And there you go, you have your shadow color. So here's a portrait that I'm currently working on. These are just the beginning layers of the portrait, the first few layers, but it has some of that greenish shadow tint. So when I use it, I just apply it in very thinly. It's just a hint of that green, of that shadow that you want in there. Typically when I see these in portraits, they're not that dominant. Or if I do see them in portraits and it's like a Caucasian flesh tone, then you would see it a lot more. Now, as I said, you can pretty much mix any skin tone using this as a base, and it's gonna be a bit more easier starting off. So here we have, you know, the typical colors that I use for my skin tones. So now we're gonna put on our pale rose blush or flesh tint. And we're gonna start to go on that. And what we're gonna actually do is we're gonna start off with it. So we're gonna get some, bring it to the middle. Now, just looking at this, you pretty much can't use that for no skin tone. But let's start off mixing light skin tones and then we'll get into the darks. So we'll start off with this. Let's say we want to tint it. We want to make it a bit more lighter at first. We're gonna add some white. We're gonna add a touch of brown. Now the brown and the blue, which I'm also gonna put a tiny bit of, that's gonna bring down the vibrancy a bit. That's gonna bring down the chroma. So you see how this is very strong. That's gonna bring it down and have it looking more realistic. Let's add a bit of yellow since it's strongly on the pink reddish side. Let's bring it that. And then I'm just gonna add a bit more white. I'm gonna mix it in. and see what we get. Another thing is when you're mixing, you want to make sure that you're really pressing and moving the paint into folds, so it's folding into each other. That's how you really get the best results when mixing paint, I found. If you're just kind of moving it around and whatnot, you're gonna get a lot of leftover residue and you're gonna get some streaks of color. So here we have more of a shadow color, you could say, for a light skin tone or for Caucasian flesh. And if you compare it to what initially came out the tube, you see how different that is. So I'm actually gonna put that right here, and that's gonna be one of our examples. You know what? I'm gonna use a bit more white in this. And this time we're gonna go for, we're still gonna try and get a bit more yellowish tint. We're pretty much trying to work with all the colors here and kind of get it to kind of tint to that. So this one, we pretty much have a brown tint, right? So let's go for the yellow, then we're gonna go for the red. The red is gonna be reasonably easy because this already has a strong reddish pink to it. All right, so we're gonna pick up some cad yellow. All right, so there we have another light skin tone or Caucasian skin tone that we mixed. And this is actually pretty good. This looks more realistic than using it straight out the tube. And you can definitely use something like this for highlights or a part where the light source is shining on, or a lighter part of the skin. So I'm gonna take some of this and I'm gonna put it to the side here. Now using the other half of what we just mixed, let's say you like this color, but you wanna bring down the chroma. Bring down the chroma mean you wanna make it more dull. You don't want it to be as strong as vibrant. Okay, what we do, we just take a tad touch of ultramarine blue. When you're mixing these colors sometimes too, always start off with a small amount and then work your way up, because once you mix in a lot, you can't go back. You can always go forward. So mix in the blue. And you can already see that it's dulling it down. And we can see that compared to right here and the original mix. So let's say this is pretty satisfactory, but you want it to be more light now. Well, you just add some white to it. And that will lighten it up. And there we go. We have another light color that we can use. Now let's say you want something more on the red side. Okay, let's go ahead and test that out. So we start off with our base. This is what we're using as our base. Start off with that. We're gonna add some of the burnt umber. We're gonna add just a touch of the cad yellow. Can add a bit more than that. Touch of the cad yellow. Then we're gonna go in more with the cad red. Now this is a very vibrant color, but as you can see, it has a bit of a more brown tint to it compared to what we originally started off with. So that's what we originally started off with, and you can see the difference. This, however, right here can still be used. It might be one of your very, not very dark highlights, shadows, but it might be one of your shadow colors. So this is just a little bit too vibrant in red. I necessarily wouldn't use it just like that. So what I will do is add a touch of ultramarine, bring down the chroma a bit. Then what else would I do is add some white to it, bring it down a bit again. So there we go. We have another color to add to our set, and this was mainly the cadmium red. All right, so as we see here, I added some of my quinacridone red and I added some of my turquoise. So now we're gonna go ahead and mix the dark skin tones using our base again. And then now we're gonna add some of the burnt umber. We're gonna be very liberal with it this time, because this is the darker skin tones. Then I'm gonna add in my quinacridone red. So I'm gonna mix this first, and then I'm gonna work my way from there. Now I'm actually this color is a color I would use just looking at it already, but I want to tint it a bit darker and have something for the shadows. So in that case, I would put some of the ultramarine blue in. When you mix a brown and ultramarine blue, so you mix your burnt umber and ultramarine blue, or raw umber and ultramarine blue, it will create a black. But you can pretty much control it and give it some vibrancy when you mix a red into the equation. So you see here, we have a natural looking dark skin tone. So this is something I would use as the shadows on my dark skin tones. All right, still going along with the dark skin tones, let's go ahead and mix another. So we're gonna use our base again. And this time we're gonna go a bit lighter than this. So we're still gonna use our umber there. Then we're gonna use our cad yellow and get a bit more cad yellow in there. This time I'm gonna go for the cad red. And we're gonna mix that all up. Now when we look at that, that's more of a chocolatey, milk chocolate skin tone. So we'll lay that right next to this one. And then we'll work on getting another lighter shade than that. All right, so let's try and get a touch lighter than what we just mixed. So add in our base. Then I'm gonna go ahead, use up this umber. Then I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna use up the cad yellow. Add that in. This time I'm gonna mix the quinacridone red. Just gonna put a touch. You could use the cad red light if you like. Now, here's where you have to practice a bit of control. I'm gonna add in some white and I'm gonna mix. And then as I go along is where I'm gonna make my adjustments. if I want to get it lighter, or if I'm satisfied with what I put together. Or if I need it to be darker, then I'm gonna go ahead and add some raw umber to it. That's one thing with mixing, is that it's an exercise where you kind of gotta push and pull. A lot of that in oil painting, not just on the canvas, but also in the figurative sense where it comes to mixing colors. You gotta go really high up sometimes with the color. You might not like it, then you gotta pull back down. Then you gotta kind of mix and match and then see where you fall right where you need to be. So this is pretty good for having a lighter shade of brown or dark skin tone. So I'm gonna lay that right there. And if we want, we can use some remnants of it. Add a bit more white to it. I'm gonna add a bit more white there. And we can get it even lighter. So you see, even some of the colors that you mix, you can still keep adjusting it and making new colors. So there we have something for our highlights for our dark skin tones. Now, I did talk about mixing the quinacridone red and the turquoise together for my skin tones to achieve that purplish tint when I'm doing dark skin tones. So let me go ahead and show you guys just exactly how I put that together. And this is usually what I use for a lot of shadows when I'm painting dark skin. And I'm kind of partial and biased to purple as of lately, but let's go ahead and put that together. So let's start off with our base. Let's get some of that burnt umber in there. Now, I'm gonna mix this on its own first, just to show you guys. Then I'm gonna incorporate it into the actual skin tone blend. So if we use a bit more. So as you see, it creates a violet, more of a purple color there. Whereas if, let's say I took my cad red and my turquoise, see, it makes kind of like a muddy color. Now, of course, there's more cad red there, but it makes more of a muddy color. So let's go ahead, mix this in to our skin tone blend. So there we go. We have our dark skin tone with that purple tint to it. This is what I would typically use for shadows. However, I have used it as the main base for some skin tones. So we'll add that to our swatch right there. So as we see on the palette, we have a lot of different skin tones here that don't really contain a high amount of yellow, which in some skin tones, whether it be dark or light, some of them do have high pigments of yellow depending on how the light bounces off of that particular subject. So let's go ahead and see if we can mix something with the more high pigmented yellow in it. So start off with our base again. We're gonna grab some cad yellow. So we already seen that brightened it up. I'm gonna add a bit more here. Then I'm gonna grab some of the white, mix that in. Now already this doesn't really look like much. It just looks like a very vibrant peach. However, what I'm going to do is add a touch of brown to it. Well, burnt umber. Now it starts to look a bit more like a skin tone. I'm going to add a touch, just a small touch of cad red. So there we have another skin tone that we can use. So I'm gonna add about half of that to our swatch here. Now with the remaining that's here, I'm actually make it more vibrant and more on the yellow side. And I'm gonna mix a bit more of our base back in there. See how that comes out. Still not to my liking. Gonna add a bit more of that base in there again. See, and this is the key in what I was telling you about starting off with small portions of the paint and then moving your way up as you need more. Because like I said, if you add too much to start, you can't go backwards, but you can always go forward if you don't have enough of one color mixed into your combination. So add a bit more of the base, the pale rose. And I'm actually really feeling this color right here. So as you see, compared to there, it's a lot more lighter, more vibrant. Let's get some more white in there. I'll just use all that up. So there we have another skin tone that we can add to our swatch. And you see how all of them are pretty much different, some drastically different, some similar. But the main thing is that a lot of them are tinted in different ways. So just for the sake of having it added to our swatch, let's go ahead and mix that green shadow combination again. So we start off with our base, then we get some of our sap green. Remember, just start off with a bit at first. And sap green is a transparent color, so it's not very opaque and gonna be very thick, which adds for a bunch of great blending qualities. So we need more sap green in there. And like I mentioned, one of the ways to bring down the chroma, if that's what you want to do, is simply adding what's opposite on the color wheel of the color that you're mixing in. So one of the main colors that we're mixing in here is a sap green. Opposite of green is of course red. So we take a touch of the cad red. Just gonna throw that in there. We have our shadow color, tinted green. But like I said, it really helps in your portraits. And this mostly helps for when you're doing light skin tones or Caucasian skin tones. So definitely give this one a shot. So there you have it, everyone. A cheat code on how to make skin tones using Pale Rose Blush. Check out my other skin tone tutorial here and subscribe here. Peace.